Some founders who have endured other economic crises may not have the energy to climb out of this current economic crisis. It may be time to pass the buck to family or next in line executives. Founders may be stubborn about losing control, and other stakeholders may not want to broach this subject. All in all, passing ownership control will not be an easy task.
I think it never is an easy task. Inherently, generation gap is not something you only experience with your parents when you're young or with your kids when you're old. It's also a part of business. I have to say that the first time I encountered that was, I think about 6 or 8 years ago, working with Tata Motors in India. Tata actually asked us to develop some kind of a toolkit that is designed exactly for those small businesses in their ecosystem on the selling side and on the supplier side, and see if they somehow, using that kit, can help smooth that transition. So yes, I'm aware of this. I have to say, first of all, this is never easy. There are two, I think, 2 points to consider. One, many times when we think about this transition, we think that we have to have a strategy for that. Meaning we have to have a clear or well-defined pathway from getting from the existing situation to the desired situation. It's good sometimes. But because many times you look at a smaller scale, and many times you have variables that have a stronger impact on decision making. You have more limited resources. Committing to one strategy could be limiting or even paralyzing. You sometimes find yourself stuck. And I think that what I would suggest in a situation like that is not ignoring strategy, but putting it aside for a minute and maybe creating a list of criteria and values. So I would ask, the team that I work with, I would ask them to make a short list of what are the most important values for them to have at the end of the way. Okay? What is it that we care for? What is it important that is important for us? Okay? And in that sense, how would we value our success? Not in terms of quantity, but in terms of quality. Okay? So that is one list. And the other list that I would ask them to create is a list of criteria. Okay? What are the business filters that every action, idea, direction, or application must comply with? And these are the filters. And by using those two lists, I would replace strategy. In other words, everything that comes in our way, whether it's an idea from a customer, whether it's an offer from a vendor, whether it's a trend in the market, we quickly measure against these two lists. If it supports our values and meet our requirements, we will do it. This is, I think, the key perspective of opportunistic innovation. You don't limit yourself to just one way of going, but instead you follow your passion and your desire, and at the same time you commit to business standards and business criteria, and you allow yourself flexibility. Now, so this is one thing, one element that I would recommend. The second one is to create that consensus building type of dialogue within the team. Okay? We all feel that we know how to talk to each other. We all feel that, we have the necessary tools. Again, if you require different types of dynamics that will lead to different types of behavior and different type of results, you have to facilitate those conversations differently, not based on what you're already used to or based on, common sense. The last point that I want to make is that any effort that we're trying to make regarding this specific problem must be focused, short, and economically justified. You can't find yourself in an adventure, diving into an adventure that will be too long or will spread out or will be too expensive. It needs to be, you can't go through, a 2 years process now with a business consultant, an organizational development consultant, and a marketing consultant. Not because these consultants don't have important stuff to contribute. It's just it's too long and it's too complicated for a small business. It has to be kind of a quick move, very smart and very safe.
Yeah, I do think that when you're drawing out I don't want to say that you're drawing out a problem, but if you're trying to pass over ownership and it's going to be a 2-year process, there's just so many things there's so many variables that can go wrong, in which then perhaps something that's involved in the negotiation process are these out clauses, and then, nothing ever gets done. And therefore then the business may continue to suffer potentially because, again, the problem here is that I know for certain that there are businesses that they do have the founder that's still at the head, and there's, specifically sons and daughters that are looking to take over the business, but the father does not want to relinquish that control. And so there's that gradual process of how do you pass over ownership? And if that gets drawn out over 2 years, it's probably not going to be good for the personal and professional relationship. So,
first of all, I want to just for a second take the conservative side and say that yes, we're all familiar with the situation when the founders are kind of holding on to their way of seeing the business, and the younger generation is trying to loosen up a little bit and modernize it, etc. I have to take for a moment the owner's side and say that the reason why the business is doing well or was doing well so far is probably due to their to the original intentions and way of looking at it. And people with a lot of experience have a lot of valuable knowledge. The fact that you're older doesn't mean that every radical thought or every extremely passionate and enthusiastic son or daughter know better. So in that sense, I give equal value to both parties. I also think that you were talking about transferring ownership over 2 years. For me, the idea of ownership is something that we can play with. There are different types of ownerships, and it gives us more degrees of freedom. And time is something that we can play with. But other than that, you as a small business, you can't afford long, expensive processes, and you definitely, especially if it's a family business, you can't afford frustration and friction. It's as important as business success.
Yeah, I mean, excellent points on just defining ownership, and that kind of goes back to the criteria part of, what's the criteria that everyone here wants to accept or what's required. And sometimes that is just clearing up what the terminology is being used, because certainly, let's say in the case of a family business, ownership to the founder may not be what it is to the son or daughter. And again, maybe it's just that clarification of what ownership means that could solve the problem there. So, okay, so I do have then just one last question that was submitted, and again, there's one more opportunity for the folks that are on this call or on this recording. If you want to chime in now is the time. So this comes from Chris from Austin, Texas. And he says, I recently got a call from the dealership that I used to work at, and they are wanting to hire me back, but I'd like to see some changes to how we keep track of inventory because there's a lot of unnecessary work, and most of it is duplicated work. I need the job, but I really like to suggest my ideas. Any advice?
Wow. Be polite, be respectful, be persistent. But this is just, kind of an intuitive advice. There are two points that I could think of here. One is if Chris is going back to work, I'm sure that there's some kind of a work agreement or a contract. For some reason, there's this, that's another type of fixedness, by the way. There's some reason why normally a
the relationship that we have is that we're the company setting the contract, and you as an employee have very little room, if any, to negotiate.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no reason, especially now or in the last 5-6 years, when workforce changes. People are perceiving their workplace differently. We have different experiences. We have different measurements and scales to measure our satisfaction and our rewards, etc. So, for me, if you can't conduct a good dialogue with your future employee on the contract, if they tell you, no, this is set, this is legal, you take it or leave it, then at least you know what you're getting yourself into. And if the company wants you, they should also benefit from that dialogue. There's probably a good reason why they want you in. So that's one point. Another point is that there are many different strategies of promoting ideas in the company. We're all familiar with the famous story of 3M Post-it notes. The guy was just, distributing his solutions to some of the secretaries in the company, and they fell in love with the product. The company had no way out other than accept it. I was involved in a stock control management project in the Philippines some time ago, and the two people who were championing this initiative, the company didn't want it. By the way, the company didn't want this to check this solution because they were very religiously following Six Sigma. So everything was fully documented, fully uniformed. There was no way to kind of try and fit something different in. And these guys just consistently arguing for an experiment. We're not asking anyone to change. We don't think that our idea is better. We just want an experiment. We just want a very small, very limited pilot. Okay? And, that was one strategy that worked for them. But there are other stories like that. People find different ways to kind of bring something about without breaking the rules, without, disrespecting authority and organizational structure, etc.
Yeah. Okay. Good. I like it. Well, Erez, thank you very much, sir. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate you helping, me even think through some of these problems. I think the one biggest takeaway is that word that has come up time and time again, and that's the idea of fixedness. And I don't know, there's just so many things now I want to look at within not only my business but in other people's business. In what are the things that are fixed, or what are the fixedness elements of their business? What are the adaptive parts or the acquired parts? What are the cognitive parts? And just seeing if there's the little things that can be tweaked amongst that. And again, like that's the easy stuff, right? Like people can look like geniuses if they just fix those little parts. So
to build on that, I think that we were all conditioned in the last 20 years when innovation became, almost a religion that everybody's like admire. We were all conditioned to only respect or focus on the big radical game changers.
Yeah, right.
These are very rare, and I can tell you from looking at companies and in the last at least 17 years for me all over the world, when you build your innovation strategies on breakthroughs, you usually don't succeed. When you look around you, there's more innovation that was created by small fragmented pieces by engineers, not by creative hippie style geniuses all over, everywhere. No, seriously, everywhere. Yet we look at the Steve Jobs and not on the guy who helped design the cap of the diaphragm of the microphone we're both using to communicate now. And there's a lot of innovation there. So yes, at the end of the day, it's more of the ongoing continuous innovation rather than the big breakthrough ones that change the game.
Good. Well, thank you, sir. Listeners, thanks for tuning into this episode of Wisco Weekly, and thank you to the live audience that tuned in for this first ever recording. I appreciate you guys. We'll be doing more of these in the coming year. As we end every episode, cheers, prost, l'chaim, kipis, nastravi, salud, kampai, mabruk, tutsins, gambe, yamas, nastarovie, salute, and vo to the customer experience.
Wisco Weekly listeners, thank you for tuning in with us to another hopefully great episode. Dennis and I are always grateful to have you along for our journey. Speaking of our journey, we've had the last few years, we've seen a lot of evolution with our show and in the industry. We are especially grateful for two of our partners, automotiveMastermind and CoMotion Miami, for coming along with us on this journey. If you are enjoying our show, please subscribe to our email list at wiscoweeklypod.com. We want to continue to bring you great content and can give you those updates if you subscribe to the email list. Please go to wiscoweeklypod.com. We look forward to connecting again soon.